Hi there everybody and big welcome to a deck tech video for Xanathar, the Guild Kingpin, or as you could also call it, the Flying Dimir Beholder. The Guild Kingpin is actually quite similar to the Zen Triplets Trio artifact. Both of these commanders are capable of shutting down one of your opponents from casting spells during your turn when they perform a trigger. That means that they are very similar to a Grand Abolisher in the command zone for only one opponent. Xanathar reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, choose target opponent. Until end of the turn, that player can't cast spells. Now, Zen Triplets actually reads the same, but Zen Triplets is also preventing people from activating abilities, so there's a tiny difference, but not a big thing. A lot of people actually forget about the Grand Abolisher part in this commander and just look straight at the following ability. You may look at the top card of their library anytime, and you may play the top card of their library, and you may spend mana as though there were any mana of color to cast those spells. So immediately here, you see a Thief commander, a commander that's basically producing a card drawing ability on your opponents, stealing your opponent's decks. And that kind of play style is really fun and also sometimes actually quite good, but it does put people in some form of tunnel visions sometimes, and they forget that they are on the dimir colors, and plan A could literally be the best thing you could usually do, which is Fasa's Consult, a 2-card combo only requiring 3 mana. And the big thing that I see here with Xanathar is that this is a commander that will perform something like a Grand Abolisher, helping you with this kind of combo. Because if plan A is cast Xanathar and start stealing your opponent's win cons and stealing your opponent's decks, well, that is a risky game plan because it's a quite expensive commander, and if someone counterspells it, it's 8 mana. Now, it's not entirely impossible to get Xanathar in play. There's a lot of potential fast mana rocks, dark rituals, and don't forget mana drain. When you counter something really expensive, you're gonna get a bunch of colorless mana in your upkeep, and that could really help you get your big beholder in play. But also those rituals can be pumped into some turbo combo, peer into the abyss, and ad nauseum. So in the end, we're just like every other cEDH deck inside the entire format, going for Fastest Oracle, Consult, and ad nauseum. Wrong! Or, well, actually, we are kinda doing the same thing everyone else is doing, but with some difference. That ability to look at the top card of your opponent's deck and being able to play it is actually quite strong. Because if you can get to the point where you're sitting with this commander and just stealing your opponent's deck turn after turn, you can really snowball and run away with the game really fast. You might have heard about Praetor's Grasp, a really good cEDH tutor, because we're all kind of playing something of the similar deck. We have a lot of overlapping cards inside our deck. So what this can do is actually get a copy of a card you already have inside your deck that went to your grave. Xanathar can do the same. You can get multiple copies of the same card from your 3 different opponents, if you're lucky digging into them, that is. Also, this is a card drawing ability that goes past both anti-creature activation and anti-artifact activation. Now, we can't specifically play any of these two, but we can play Curse Totem. We could actually include Null Rod, but we are going to be a little bit reliable on artifacts, so we aren't going to include Null Rod. But Curse Totem is definitely a great Stax piece that doesn't affect this commander at all, but will definitely affect a lot of others out there. Because there is another big final boss out there, Kenrith, the Return King, that is a menace, a true powerhouse in the late game of cEDH when you get to that turn 8+. And Curse Totem is solving Kenrith quite well, while Xanathar is running away with the game. So we have all the amazing tools for a great late game, we just need to get there. And the absolute best way of getting to a late game is not trying so hard to actually get to a late game. Now that might sound a little bit strange, because normally the best way of getting to the late game is controlling the board state with all your force, so that you get to the late game, preventing everyone from winning. Dedicated Stax decks can easily take it to the late game, where they can take over, using cards like these. Now, the big problem with Xanathar is that we can't actually play a bunch of these. Well, we can actually play Curse Totem, Oppo Agent, and Daffy Voidwalker, and we are doing so. We have a little bit more than those, but in the end, it's actually really hard to build a dedicated Stax decks with the dimir colors. Now, you could actually build a little bit more into Stax. For example, you have Back to Basic, a really good blue card that is hurting a great majority of decks out there today actually. But there are two major problems here with that, and first one is that sure, back to basics is great, but it still won't be enough in the card pool of good blue-black hate bear Stax cards to make Xanathar into a dedicated functional Stax deck. Another really big problem is that we suddenly lose Tainted Pact, a key card for a fastest consult combo. Back to basic demands we only play basic lands, while this demand we play a whole bunch of non-basic land. They really contradict each other. And in reality, you will have that amazing late game with Xanathar when you naturally, accidentally get to that late game, where everyone is sitting there with counterspells and interacting with each other, and Xanathar is just sneaking in there. Everyone is in top decking mode, but you. Now some of you might say, but what about counterspells? Couldn't we secure a path to a great late game with a whole bunch of counterspells, let's say counterspell tribal, to achieve that? No. If you're gonna sit there with your counterspells trying to control 3 different opponents, you're gonna run out of something called card economy, or something called run out of gas. Thrasius and Tymna are actually a pair that can go to a counterspell late game because their card drawing capability from the command zone is just so great. They come into play early in the game and they start accumulating cards to your hand also quite early in the game. Xanathar won't do this. He will come into play later in the game with that really high CMC cost of 6 and then start to accumulate value. Not by drawing cards, not by drawing into counterspells, but drawing into things your opponent have. So you're still in the top decking mode of your own deck. So does this mean that we're going to cut all of our counterspells? No, definitely not. We're just going to have a different view on them. Sure, we are going to control a few opponents here and there that are trying to win really early, but the main focus of your counterspells is going to be to protect your main plan A combo fast as consult. Counterspells are truly great, and something you should really try to have inside your deck if you have access to blue, because they are really great at directing the game. Sometimes with counterspells, you get to dictate and choose what kind of game this is going to be in the future terms, because sometimes you can sit and counterspell a few hate bears and Stax pieces you don't want inside the game, but sometimes you can use your counterspells to protect hate bears and Stax pieces you actually do want to have inside the game. For example, a Narset Parter of Veils isn't something that we are that bothered about. It's actually something you can include inside the Xanathar deck, by the way. But if one of our opponents have one, we could actually sometimes protect this, because we are able to dig value with Xanathar by just casting the top card of people's library. We are never drawing cards, we're just casting cards. But we definitely do care about an Archon of Emeria or any form of rule of law effect. That is definitely hurting us. So here we want to use counterspells to get rid of these, while we sometimes want to protect these. You see, the best way of actually combating and dealing with Stax effects is to build a deck that doesn't really care about Stax cards at all. And this is where Xanathar truly excels. Do you remember in the beginning of the video that why do we actually play this? And also something I said, we will get the late game when we get the late game. We have the ultimate, or well, there are lots of different really great late game commanders out there, and this is definitely one of them. The way you pilot this deck is that when you go into battle, your plan A in the early game is to focus on winning fast the Turbo Dimir way with fastest consult, peer into the beast that you ritual out, or an odd Nasim that you ritual out, or that you focus on like counterspelling your other opponents that might be faster than you. In the early game, you can actually play Xanathar with the purpose of having it as a Grand Abolisher if you have the extra mana turbo speed for it. If this fails, you go to the mid game, and in the mid game you need to be patient. Don't rush out Xanathar too fast. In the mid game, a lot of people usually have a lot of interaction and Gilded Drakes. This deck is terrified for Gilded Drakes. Gilded Drake is like the best counter to a Xanathar, by the way. So you wanna lean back a little bit, build a little bit of cards to your hand, build some mana production, have some counterspells in your hand, so that you're ready for that really sluggishy, long, staxy, drawn-out game. Don't kill the stacks, let them exist, let your opponents put hate bears and stacks effects in play, and just lean back and observe the sluggish battlefield, and then get your Xanathar in play and start taking over the match, grinding out value and snowballing away from everyone else. Because once again, the best way of combating and fighting stacks is simply not being affected at all by it. So you just ignore, or it kind of depends of what form of stacks effects your opponents are doing and what you have in hand and such, but in general don't care that much if there are stacks effects in play, especially if there are other opponents that are more affected by it than you, which there usually will be. Today's deck and commander have been brought to us by Keith. Link in the description below of the video. This deck is a mixture of a little bit of everything, but all of it kind of synergize in here together. For example, we have an Ashiok that is a great hate bear stacks effect that is preventing Surge, but also capable of removing the top card of your opponent's library if you're not really happy about the results. So if you're triggering the Beholder, targeting someone, Ashiok can actually manipulate that for you, as well as obviously scheming symmetry that is actually amazing inside Xanathar. Also inside this deck we have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, capable of top manipulating your opponent's libraries if you're unhappy with the Xanathar result, but this also functions like a secondary Thassa's Oracle, increasing your consistency. Then we have some really interesting toys, like Dimir, Lobotomist. That is a little bit questionary, but here it actually functions quite well because of that top decking manipulation that you can get here with Xanathar. But he also has a form of interaction. Now you're gonna say no because it's a singleton format, but he actually reads: your opponents can't cast spells with the same names at card exiled will Dimir, Lobotomist. So if you're exiling, let's say, a Ragavan from one of your opponents, the other two opponents can't cast their Ragavan. And remember, once again, we're usually playing a really mirrored format where most of us are playing something of the same deck. For example, I'm quite certain there's a Soul Ring in all of your free opponents' libraries somewhere around there. But all of the other key components are all in here. Somewhere here we have Peer into the Abyss, we have Ad Nauseam, Dark Ritual, Demonic Consultation, there's a Thassa's Oracle somewhere, there it is. And Wishclaw Talisman for Tutor, Vamp Tutor, Tainted Pact. Yeah, the whole combo package, all is in there. So let's look at some opening hand potential. So here we have one that is really garbage. It has Consult, it has Muddle the Mixture. Actually, it's not that bad. I mean, here we have a Tutor for Thassa's Oracle and have a Demonic Consultation. So this is a potential keep. You could definitely win turn 3 with this hand. I actually like this hand. We have a Copy Artifact that is some ramp. We have 2 lands here so we can get going, and we have a Trinket Mage to get some more potential ritual artifact, and a Demonic Tutor to get that Ad Nauseam into your hand, or a Thassa's Oracle with the Demonic Tutor, and then following up with a Tainted Pact. So this could win something like a turn 4, which is decent. I don't like this hand. We have to mulligan that one. I really like this hand. It has a Preordain, it has a Mana Vault, and a Dimir Signet. You can actually cast a Mana Vault turn 1, then tap it, Dimir Signet, and then still tap it with the leftover mana from the Mana Vault and cast a Preordain. And yeah, that could get really going here. Another really big important thing we need to talk about for this commander is that it's a really fun commander in its variance of what it actually is doing. Remember, you're playing with your opponent's decks, so depending on what opponents you're going up to against, you're gonna have different games each time, and that could be really appealing sometimes, as cEDH decks can be quite repetitive sometimes. Hope you liked the video, guys. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and you wanna support me, feel free to share my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link in the description below of the video will also help the channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.